Hello and welcome to Teacher Talk, the podcast for teachers who are lifers but still want to have a life. This is Jared, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Johanna.
Hi, Johanna.
Hi, Jared.
What are we going to talk about today?
We are continuing our discussion of behavior management plans, only this time we are looking at secondary.
So what's the difference between elementary and secondary?
Well, if you remember, I said that elementary is like cats. No, I didn't say that.
Secondary is like cats, elementary is like dogs?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Because the dog wags their tail and accidentally knocks the drink over, but the cat looks at the drink and says, I think I want this on the ground.
Correct. Right. Secondary cats, they have a little bit of premeditation in their choices.
You said that not necessarily is this division between elementary and secondary, but it tends to be?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That's correct. Yep. Just like I said last time, it could be that this is true in an elementary classroom. It's just, in general, this tends to be more of a secondary concern.
Because the older students are choosing their behavior management problems and instead of just being motivated to them by their nature because they're tired or full of just got back from recess or something. Like little kids, like you say, are more like dogs, and it just kind of happens because of their nature.
Yes.
Whereas now you're dealing with more. I'm picking to look at my phone instead of pay attention in class because that's what I want to do.
Right. There's purpose, and a lot of times it does rely on because I want to.
So what do you do in this situation with the behavior management plan?
Okay, well, the first thing I think is a grand overview that teachers need to realize is the power of us versus them. Students at the secondary level, or once they're kind of thinking with premeditation when they're choosing their behaviors, they are thinking about the world as there is team us and there is them. And you never ever want to be seen as the them, the other side. You always want to be included as a part of the us.
But you're the teacher and they're the students. That's a pretty natural us and them. How do you get past that?
Okay, it is pretty natural. And the trick to get past that is to create policies and procedures and routines and everything, and then put it in a poster. Think of it just like a game. Your classroom has to function like a game, okay? If we're playing Monopoly, you and I might be players who are competing against each other, but the rules are the same, right? If you roll the dice and then you land on go directly to jail, you don't get mad at me, the other player. You might get mad at the dice, but you don't even question the fact that that is the rule. Like, you landed on the spy. It says go to jail. You go to jail, right? So
or Chutes and Ladders.
Or Chutes and Ladders, yeah.
Because you might be mad that you're the one that landed on the chute, but it's got nothing to do with any of the other players in the game.
Right.
It's just the consequence of that square.
Right. And so you need to have, as a teacher, anything that, even though you made it, you're the inventor of the game, it needs to be the poster's fault. It needs to be the policy's fault.
The poster says you're looking at your phone in class. Here's the chute. You go to this square.
Right. And as long as you're pleasant and calm and consistent,
it's not your fault. It's the poster's fault.
Right.
And in some way, we all agreed, in a way, well, yeah, that's what the poster said.
And there is a lot of great work around having the students actually develop the poster, like in a social contract setting. It's just, I think in the secondary level, it tends to be, in the elementary, that's easier. You have less students. If you're a general classroom teacher, you have the same students all day long. But if you're teaching science or industrial tech, you might have students constantly revolving, and you don't have time to A, dedicate towards creating a social contract, or B, keeping track of which class has which contract.
Sure. So what kind of chutes do you put on your poster?
Okay, so I recommend that teachers just take time and create a list of expected behavior issues that you have in your classroom.
Just like the elementary list.
Just like the elementary list. However, you need to consider other things, right? There's cell phones. There's what your school already has set up as a policy. Homework. Okay, it's a whole separate debate whether you should or should not give students homework. But a kid not doing their homework is a behavior that also needs to be established.
If you do have homework, not doing it is a behavior management thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Same with missing supplies. We could argue whether supplies should just be offered in the classroom or whether it's expected they bring them.
Pencil to class. If you don't, that's a behavior?
Right. Assuming that's a little more nuanced because you have to assume they have access to a pencil. Anyway, we'll get down that rabbit hole in just a minute. But making a list of not just what do I want to say? What's the word?
Innovative?
No, if I'm not paying attention, I am...
Inattentive.
Inattentive.
Yes.
So inattentive behaviors, behavior distractions.
It's like the pyramid game. It's like you give the clues. And it's like, if I'm not paying attention, I'm...
Yes.
I say, and then, okay, and then you say pass. And then Joan Rivers eventually gives the right clue. Anyway.
Is she really good at it?
I don't know. I mean, she's was on it.
Okay. Okay, so yeah.
$64,000 pyramid, and it's the only one that counts. Anyway.
I love that.
Okay.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Yes, no, that I have a good story about that game show, but we're going to keep going. So instead, you've made a list of all the common expected general students are going to have this issue behaviors. Then you also want to take the time, if your school district already hasn't, or your county or your school, and anything that would drastically influence how the class behaves. We're talking kind of what I would label major behaviors. You also kind of want to pinpoint those extreme behaviors that if they happened...
But those are going to be in like the student handbook or some other like official behavior management plan already, aren't they?
If you're in a big school, yes. There probably already is a plan. However, smaller schools might not have one. It's just, if a plan exists, great. If it doesn't, you need to think about what that will look like.
This is like I'm violent towards another student?
Sure.
Does that go on the poster, or is that like on like a secret poster that's in the desk or something?
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that right now. So for example, in my school, we have a list of majors and minors, and essentially major behaviors are automatically the administration's responsibility. I just have at the bottom of my poster, all major behaviors are immediately handled by administration, and then that's the rule.
And are major behaviors defined?
Our school does define major behaviors.
But is it like on the poster, or is it something that you talk about with the class, or like do they already know it, or how does that become? How does it know what major is?
Okay, so before, long time ago, before my school had created a list of majors and minors, I just defined for my students any behavior that prevented a large chunk of the class from learning. Those were separate major behaviors, and they instantly, it's like, and I actually did use the Monopoly reference of you've like landed on jail. You
go straight to jail.
Go straight to jail, don't collect $200. So my kids just knew if I ever did anything that all of a sudden prevented many peers of mine from learning, that I was immediately going to go.
If everybody gets silent and their eyes get big and they wait to see what happens, that was a major?
Yes.
Okay.
Since then, we've defined explicitly what majors and minors are. They're labeled in the handbook, but you could be in a school where they don't have that labeled, so you want to kind of have that as a side note. Okay.
We both said okay at the same time?
We did.
We got majors, and again, like the goal of what you did with the majors there is it's not you choosing to send person to the office. It's the consequence of the thing that person chose to do is causing them to be sent to the office. It just happens. No different than the landing on the chute or landing on the go to jail square in Monopoly.
Right. It's not about me. It's not my choice. That's what the poster says.
With the elementary students, you had your peace corner or some other way for the kids to self-isolate when they felt a behavior issue coming on, right? Is that something that applies only to elementary, or is it something that you use for the cats in the secondary?
All right, so this is kind of moving into phase 3, which is now you got to take those.
Phase 1 was similar to elementary. It's expected behavior.
No, it's the us versus them.
Us versus them is phase 1.
Phase 1, us versus them.
Is make sure that you're not them.
Right.
Which isn't so important with the dogs.
No.
Because the dogs will sort of treat you like you are us anyway. That's what's the difference. That dogs want to be led and influenced by the person that's in charge of them. The cats are in a much more of a, like, well, I don't have to listen to her because she's not us.
Very insightful. You're right. That is the I never thought about that. That is the difference. The dogs want to be led. The cats do not. They want autonomy.
So then step 2 is very similar in that you are pre-defining anticipated behavior issues.
Correct.
But it's for a different reason. For the reason for the dogs, you're doing it so that you aren't reacting in any kind of emotional or uncertain way.
And it's even more important than that, they've practiced. They don't even think about their reaction. The reaction has been practiced over and over. They know what they're going to do when they feel X or Y starts happening. It's all practiced. Makes them feel safe inside.
But with the cats, you're doing it so that you can avoid falling into the us versus them trap.
Correct.
You're defining, for the dogs, it's so that they can practice the outcomes of the behavior. For the cats, it's so that it can become a predefined consequence and not your decision that creates conflict between you and them.
Right. It is fair and consistent, just like in a game.
Okay. So phase 3 then.
Phase 3. Now you have to go through, it's simple if it's a major, right? We get that. And the kids get it too, right? They know when a major has occurred. The minor is where it gets trickier. So you need to look at your list and you need to say, are any of these similar? Can they be handled by the same process? So for example, attention-seeking behaviors, falling asleep, not paying attention, not engaged in the learning, blah, 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 talking to your friend when I'm talking. All of that really can be handled by the same system. But then if you have things like homework, well, that might be separate. Technology might need a separate system. So you want to kind of think through, can anything be grouped? And if not, then I need to make a separate system and plan for that.
Categorize things as, for example, attention seeking, and then there's another category of like just unpreparedness on lack of planning.
Sure.
It's like 2 different categories of behavior issues that can have the same type of consequence, the same. What is the point of categorizing them?
The point of categorizing them is to try and make the systems, routines, procedures, posters, whatever, so that you have as few as possible, right? You want as many things to be able to be handled under the same policy as possible.
Okay.
So for my classroom, I was able to get away with just one system and routine, but I happened to mentor a math teacher and she needed to have 2 because homework was a big element in her classroom. Band, bringing your instrument, that is a non-negotiable, so they would need 2. So it just kind of depends on what you teach, how many you need.
Okay, so what did the different categories look like then? You got one for attention-seeking behaviors, going to be one in every classroom, right?
Well, I actually lump all of those together. Anything that is preventing you from learning or those next to you from learning all goes on. So I happen to use the PBIS, safe, respectful, responsible, because that's what was expected in my school. But basically, when you weren't being one of those 3 things, this is what I did.
But what if I do have 2? I've got attention-seeking and homework preparedness or whatever. Like, what do they look? How are they different?
Okay, let's take homework or a different like band and the instrument. Let's
Sure.
take that and set that aside for right now, and we'll come back to it. So for me, you talked about how do I incorporate like essentially the Peace Corner, but at the secondary level. If a student doesn't want to engage in the learning, they probably have a pre-learned habit that they do when they don't want to learn. talk to a friend, get on their phone, put their head down on their desk, get attention from the teacher or someone else, whatever. They have a thing that they do. I have a quiet zone in my classroom, which is basically if you don't want to learn, fine, go sit in the quiet zone. There is nothing in the quiet zone. You are by yourself. You don't take any of your stuff with you. You don't get to have your cell phone. You do not have to engage in the learning. I am not going to talk to you. You can just sit there. And you can sit there as long as you want.
Does that work?
It does.
So it makes sense in theory that those behaviors are mostly just signaling, I don't want to do this.
Right, so at the secondary level, let's say you're on your phone, okay, and you're not supposed to be on your phone, we're in the middle of something. I can just either have a cue, or I can just tell you something, or like if it's a kid that constantly has this issue, I like to have a private signal between them and I where I might hand them a highlighter or do something rather than say, because that is still true at the secondary. Words sink your ship. Like you want to have actions as much as possible. So I might say, Jared, if you're not wanting to engage in the learning, I'm happy to help you. Let me know how I can help. Otherwise, if you just don't want to do the learning, you can go to the quiet zone or quiet area or quiet seats or whatever you call them. And then that's kind of level 1. Normally, you're just like, fine, and you put away your phone and you go back to work.
Sure, okay.
And then level 2 for me was like, okay, I told you not to do something. Now I might wait like a minute to 30 seconds. You're still on your phone. Then I might come back over and say, now it's not a choice. You need to go to the quiet zone. Again, give it 30 seconds to a minute. Level 3, now I actually still had at the secondary level the reflection desk. So now you got to fill out a reflection. The trick is that none of it am I angry, mad, upset. I am pleasant, calm, and consistent. It doesn't matter if you are the A+ student that never ever does anything wrong. I treat you the exact same as the kid who seems to do something wrong, quote unquote, every single day. Exact same.
Because you're not reacting. You're just helping to cause the rules to...
Right, and I literally point at the poster. I have the poster huge. 200, 300 size font. You want it to be large and in charge. So for me, it was so I stayed consistent. Because the first time you don't follow your poster, you might...
It becomes a whole different
You
game.
might as well throw it away.
It becomes a game of us versus you, and to see what we can make you either allow or disallow.
Right. Why? Well, she didn't have to. They'll remember. 3 weeks ago, you didn't make so-and-so go to the Peace Corner when she had her phone out, and now you're sunk. Now they are right.
There's a concept of, like a philosophical concept of like a robber and a time safe. And that it seems like if you had a robber come in to your store or whatever, would you want to be able to open the safe or not? And he's like, well, if I have the option to open the safe, I can always pretend to not be able to open the safe. So isn't it always better to have an option? And it's, well, no, when you're dealing with other people, sometimes it's better to not have an option so that they can know that you don't. Because if the robber knows that you could open the safe if you wanted to, they can torture you until you do.
Right.
Well, once
sure.
the robber knows that it doesn't matter if they torture you or not, you still can't open the safe. Well, now there's no reason to torture you.
Right. Okay, so then for me, that level 3, the same as my elementary classroom, was filling out a reflection. This is important because, remember, they're not in trouble. Level 3 for me is about increasing communication. They could be on their...
This is your chance to say what's wrong.
And sometimes kids will jump right to level 3. You know you've done level 3 right when you go tell the kid...
And they want it.
And they're like, I'm going to fill out a reflection. Yeah. Like, if the kid has their head down on their desk and you're like, you appear a little tired. Do you want to go to the think times, or not think time, elementary, the quiet zone, and they instead go right to the reflection, then you're doing the good thing. Because if the kid, let's say we take that kid that's on their phone. Okay, let's say it's a girl. She goes to the reflection desk and she tells you, I don't know, so-and-so just sent me a text. He said he's breaking up with me. Da-da-da-da-da. I mean, right? The only thing that's written in stone is that they're going to fill out the reflection and you're going to read it. After that, your choices are your choices. You might read that and go like, wow, what if we give you 4 minutes in the hall so that you can manage this personal situation? Is that fair? And then you come back into the classroom, right? Or the kid who's got their head down on the desk and it turns out maybe they screwed up, but they just all out confess. I stayed out too late last night. I'm really tired. You know, if they're willing to give you all that information, you can then as a team decide, okay, you feel too tired to engage in this learning. What do you think we should do? And the kid might say, I'm going to sit in the quiet zone the rest of the class. Or why don't I grab a drink of water? I think I can do it. I'll go back into the classroom. So,
because this communication kind of creates us that's you and them.
Yes,
now
yes.
you share this little secret with them that puts you on the us, and then the rest of the class is on the other side. Now you can work together without having it being you enforcing discipline on them. It's like you're finding a solution based upon this shared knowledge.
Right. It is quiet, it is respectful, and it's private.
And now if I'm a old school sit down and shut up type teacher, this seems really weak and wishy-washy to me. But guess what? They weren't going to be learning anyway. So all you were doing with your sit down and shut up plan was forcing them to engage in behavior to display that they're not going to be learning and disrupting you and everything else at the same time.
You've created the opportunity for conflict, and then you've given the kid the power to choose how far is that conflict going to go, you know? I mean, an angry 16-year-old girl, she will set fire to the situation if you do not respect her emotional needs. She will take you down, and it is her choice how big a situation she makes it. Same is true. And if they sit down and fill out that reflection and they just chew you a new one, well, you know what? They didn't do it in front of the entire class.
Sure.
And then you can just say, you're angry. You don't think I'm... But the other thing is, remember, they have to sit in that seat until the reflection is done, and then I tend to do it just like a timeout. If they are 15, they're going to sit in that seat for about 15 minutes. And again, you might say, like, well, then they're not learning for 15... Well, they weren't going to learn for 15 minutes anyway. Now, they're not harming anyone else.
And they're getting better faster, too. Like, it's win-win.
It truly is, but it can feel like it's not in the moment.
With a lot of things, you could pretend that there wasn't a problem and yell at it until you wish it went away. But there's a lot to talk about with behavior, right?
There's a lot to talk about with behavior.
And no one wants to listen to a 50-minute podcast yet. Eventually, our podcast will be so popular that people just can't get enough of hanging with their friends Johanna and Jared. We'll be able to ramble on about whatever. This is just like, you ever listen to stuff you should know? Like, it started out as like 6-minute podcasts, and now if it's 40, it's a short one.
But Jared, our kids can't stay quiet like this long forever.
No, they probably heard a little bit of them on this one.
we got to keep these things to 20, or we'll never be able to do it.
We also have the lovely room tone of cicadas that people can enjoy. So maybe we should record earlier in the day. Anyway, all these fun podcast making moments we'll have plenty more for you, and not in the next episode because it'll be the second half of this one. But look forward to more brilliant interstitial podcast recordings, letting you know that part 2 is coming next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Johanna.
Thank you for listening to
Teacher Talk, the podcast for teachers who are lifers but still want to have a life.